Hi there, in this video we will continue our journey and we will add some more CSS to services section of Vesco website. In this video we will add CSS to services items. We will first look at the HTML markup for services items. I'll make the sidebar visible. We have a container div inside the services section and this container div is divided into two rows. And each row has 3 equal columns for services items. Inside each column, we have div wrapper for single service item, and inside service item wrapper, we have wrapper for icon, title, and description. As you can see, we used classes for services items. And now we will add CSS to these classes and it will be applied to all the services items in these two rows. And this is the reason I used classes for these div elements. I'll go back to the style.css file. I will add comments for services section inside the style.css file. All the CSS for services section will go under this services section. I'll add some space. Okay, first we need to add some CSS to service item wrapper, and the class value for service item wrapper is service-item. Let us add some CSS rules to this service item div. I'll write dot and after that I'll write service-item, and inside these curly braces we'll write CSS rules for service item div. We need to add some inside space for each service item. I think we need to add the top and bottom space inside each service item. And to add inside space, we use Css Padding property. I'll write the Css Padding property. I'll set the top space to 20 pixel, right space 0, bottom space 20 pixel, and left space 0 pixel. It will create inside top and bottom spaces for each service item, and you can see that this CSS rule is applied to all the services items because of classes, and this is the benefit of using CSS classes. Okay, let me create some outside space at the bottom of each service item, and to create outside space at the bottom of each service item we can use CSS margin bottom property. I'll write CSS margin bottom property and I'll set the value for this margin bottom property 20 pixel, and it will create a 20 pixel space at the bottom of each service item, and you can clearly see space between these two rows. Next, let me set the cursor for each service item to pointer, and I will use the CSS cursor property and I'll set it to pointer. So when user hover on each service item, user will see a pointer on each service item. Next, we have an icon for each service item, and now we'll start adding CSS for icons. If you look at the HTML markup for icon, we have a div and the class value for this div is service-item-icon. And inside this div we have the icon element. Let's add some CSS rules to this I element. I'll write dot and after that I'll write service-item-icon, and inside this div we have the I element, and inside these curly braces we will write the CSS for icons. I want the color of all the icons to be greenish blue color, and for that we will use CSS color property, and the hexa value for greenish blue color is #34C6D3, and it will set the color for icons to be greenish blue color. Next, let me float all the icons to the left, and for that I will use the CSS float property and I'll set it to left. The CSS float property specifies whether or not an element should be floated. In this case, we want all the icons to be floated to the left. And now you can see that all the icons are floated to the left. Let me create some space around the icon, and we will use the CSS padding property and I'll set it to 15, which means top, right, bottom and left value will be set to 15. And now you can see space around the icons. Next, let me add some space between the icon and the heading, and for that we'll use the margin right property. And I'll set it to 25 pixel. And now you will see space between the icon and the heading on the right side. Next, let me set the width and height for each icon. I'll use the width property. I'll set it to 75 pixel. And I'll use the height property and I'll set it to 75 pixel. And now you can see that all the icons have equal width and height. Let me align all the icons to the center inside the box, and for that we use CSS text alignment property, and the value for CSS text align property is center. And now you can see that all the icons are aligned to the center inside boxes. Next, we will change the color and the background color for an icon on mouse hover of service item. I mean, when user mouse hover on service item, the color and the background color for an icon will be changed. Let me show you how we can achieve such functionality. I'll select the service item and I'll use the CSS hover pseudo clause on service item, and after that I'll write the service item icon, and inside this div we have the I element, and inside these curly braces I'll set the color to white and I'll set the background color to greenish blue color, and the hexa code for greenish blue color is 34C6D3. Now let me show you the result of these CSS rules inside the browser. Now you can see that when I mouse over on each service item, the background color and the color for an icon are changing. So on CSS hover event, we can change another element styling. In this case, we are changing the color and the background color for an icon element on mouse hover of services item, and we get this beautiful effect. Okay, we will move forward and we will start adding CSS rules to this h3 element, which is inside service item title div. We'll write dot, and after that we'll write service hyphen item hyphen title, and inside this div we have the h3 element. Okay, it is service item title, and inside these curly braces we will write the CSS rule for this h3 element. We want to set the font size for this h3 element. I'll write the font size property and I'll set it to 20 pixel. Okay. Next, let me increase the font thickness for these headings, and for font thickness we use the font weight property and I'll set it to 400. We need to set some margin for these headings. I'll write the margin property. I'll set the top margin to 0, right margin to 0, and bottom margin to 10 pixel. And left margin to 0 pixel. Okay, now these headings look fine. After the heading we have paragraph element, and it is inside service item description div. Let us apply some CSS rules to this p element. I'll write dot service hyphen item description or DSC, and inside this div we have the p element. Let me set the margin for this p element to 0, because it seems that there is some default margin for this p element, and I'll set it to 0. Next, let me add some space on left side of each paragraph for each service item, and for that we will use padding left property, and I'll set it to 85 pixel, and it will create 85 pixel space on the left side of each paragraph. One last thing, we need to add some generic CSS for all the H3 and P elements. And to add some generic CSS for P and H3 element, we will move to the General CSS section. I'll add some generic CSS for the P element. I'll write P, and inside these curly braces, I'll set the color property. I want the color for all the P elements for Vesco project to blue Bionics color. Now the color for all the P elements is blue Bionics color. Let me set the font size for all the P elements. I'll set the font size to 16 pixel. And I'll set the font weight for all the P elements. I'll write font weight property and I'll set it to 300. Okay, now it is a light font weight. Last, let me add the color property for all the H3 elements. And for that, I'll include the color property inside this selector. I want the color for H3 element to be steel gray color. Now the color for all the H3 elements is steel gray color. I'll refresh this web page. Now we have a good looking services section. I'll save all of these files. In next video, I will add some animations to the services section. Please do ask me if you have any question. I will be glad to help you. See you in next video. Thanks.